Welcome to this special investigative documentary edition for Deep Dive Files. I want you to imagine a quiet, affluent neighborhood, winding, narrow streets, no streetlights. And that is by design, to protect the clear view of the night sky out there. High-end homes just tucked into the rugged, dense brush of the desert.
Right, the Catalina Foothills.
Exactly, just outside Tucson, Arizona. It's the kind of place where you're supposed to feel insulated from the chaos of the world. But today, we are going to completely change how you view your own front door.
Yeah, we are. We're conducting an exhaustive, minute-by-minute forensic deconstruction of a case that has absolutely gripped the nation. The abduction of 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie, and we have an immense stack of materials in front of us today.
Oh, I really do.
We are pulling from heavily redacted FBI timelines, local news reports, cybersecurity expert analyses, forensic evidence logs, and even clinical psychological evaluations on the toll this specific agonizing kind of crime takes on a family.
And my mission today is to basically play the grounded skeptic. We have a lot of highly technical theories to sort through, and I'm going to be pushing back on the tech jargon. I want to figure out what is actually plausible in the real world versus, what just sounds really good in a police briefing.
Which is fair. And I'll be stepping in as your forensic tech analyst. I'm going to help us break down the digital evidence, because this case is essentially a terrifying puzzle of digital breadcrumbs.
Right. And whether you are a true crime aficionado dissecting every clue on Reddit, or you are just someone trying to understand the actual vulnerabilities of your modern smart home technology, this deep dive is going to keep you up at night.
It truly serves as a watershed moment in modern criminal investigation. I mean, this was not a random snatch and grab. As we will uncover, the abduction, which occurred in the early morning hours of February 1st, 2026, was a highly calculated surgical operation.
Yeah.
It involved the systematic neutralization of security infrastructure, weeks of behavioral casing, and a terrifying level of premeditation that exploited the very technology meant to keep us safe.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We need to start by looking at the days before the crime, because the timeline does not actually begin on the dark night Nancy disappeared. It begins exactly 3 weeks prior, under the bright Arizona sun on January 11th.
Right.
What exactly was happening in the neighborhood that morning?
We have to look at the behavioral casing. So Aldine Meister, a woman who has lived in the Catalina Foothills for nearly 30 years and knows the rhythm of her street intimately, she reported a chilling sighting to the FBI.
Okay.
She was getting ready in the morning, looking out her bathroom picture window, and she saw a young man walking down the street. And immediately, her internal alarm bells went off.
Yeah, I read her description in the local reports, and I keep coming back to how much this individual stood out. I mean, in the Catalina Foothills, if you are walking around on a crisp January morning, there is a specific uniform.
Oh, absolutely.
You are in high-end hiking gear, you are power walking, you are exercising with a golden retriever. But Meister described this man as wearing what she called street clothes.
Which is a huge anomaly for that area.
Right. He had on flat-soled shoes that you absolutely would not use for walking or hiking in the desert. He was hunched over, walking at a glacial pace, and he had a baseball hat pulled down so low over his eyes that his face was completely obscured.
And that posture is a massive red flag in behavioral analysis. A hunched posture combined with a slow, deliberate pace in an area designed for fast-paced recreation. It suggests someone trying to minimize their physical profile while maximizing their observation time.
He was hiding in plain sight.
Exactly. And the most critical detail Meister provided, she said he took a long look at the specific street where Nancy Guthrie resided. He was not passing through, he was observing. Meister told reporters that it freaked her out because he was clearly scoping out the area. In the intelligence community, this is classic reconnaissance.
But it was not just a strange pedestrian wandering through, right? We also have to layer in neighbor Brett McIntyre's sighting, because he lives across the street from Guthrie, and he reported seeing a full-sized white van parked on the street in the days leading up to the disappearance. And again, context is everything here.
Context is key. A white van isn't inherently suspicious on its own.
Exactly. But McIntyre noted it was completely unmarked. No printing on the sides, no plumbing logo, no electrical company phone number. Anyone doing legitimate contract work in that specific affluent neighborhood has a marked company vehicle.
That unmarked van provides the cover necessary for prolonged static observation. The FBI refers to this pattern as the case-targeted abduction theory.
Okay, break that down for me.
Well, the perpetrator, or a team of perpetrators, likely spent weeks monitoring Nancy Guthrie's routines from that vehicle and on foot. They needed to establish a pattern of life.
Like when she leaves, when family visits.
Exactly. What are her mobility limitations? And crucially, they needed to map out the neighborhood's security network and utility infrastructure. You do not execute a blackout on a whim. You map the electrical and digital grid of the target first.
Wow. Which brings us to the final hours of normalcy. Saturday, January 31st. Nancy has a completely routine evening. At 5:32 p.m., she takes an Uber to her daughter Annie's house for dinner. She spends a nice evening with her family. Then at 9:48 p.m., her son-in-law, Tommaso Cioni, drives her back to her home.
And police confirmed that Cioni followed standard family protocol. He waited in the driveway to make sure she was safely inside.
Right.
At 9:50 p.m., the garage door closes. That mechanical hum of the door shutting is the final confirmed moment that Nancy Guthrie is known to be secure inside her own home.
Less than 4 hours later, that security just evaporates. Let's move to the early morning hours of Sunday, February 1st. The timeline the FBI has constructed here is agonizingly precise. At 1:47 a.m., Nancy's doorbell security camera is suddenly disconnected.
Yeah.
Walk us through what the forensic data shows happening at that exact minute.
So the suspect actually approached the door and attempted to knock the doorbell camera off its mount with light calculated taps.
Like trying to dislodge it without breaking it.
Right. Yes, exactly. But when they could not physically dislodge the hardware, they resorted to a really low-tech masking technique. They used foliage from a large potted plant sitting on the porch to cover the lens.
Unbelievable.
Now, Nancy did not have an active premium cloud storage subscription for her Google Nest camera. So initially, local police thought no video of this encounter existed because it wasn't beamed up to an easily accessible cloud account.
But the FBI found something.
If they did, FBI digital forensic experts were brought in, and they were able to dive into the camera's back-end edge computing systems. They extracted crucial cached images and video directly from the device's internal memory buffer.
And the footage they managed to pull from that buffer is pure nightmare fuel. I mean, it's from 2:12 a.m. when the camera software detected motion through the leaves of that potted plant. The FBI released this footage, and the media has dubbed the suspect the Porch Monster.
It's an eerie nickname, but it fits.
It really does. It is a figure with an average build, roughly 5'9" to 5'10". They are wearing a zip-up hoodie, baggy sweatpants, dark tactical gloves, a heavy balaclava ski mask covering every inch of their face, and they are carrying a black backpack.
And significantly, the individual is armed.
Right.
The enhanced footage reveals what appears to be a handgun, but it's improperly placed. The suspect has it shoved into a holster located directly over their crotch rather than on the hip or in a shoulder rig.
Which is weird, right?
Very. Retired FBI agent Lance Lysing reviewed this specific framing and noted that the weapon is held in a very unusual amateurish way. It suggests someone who might be heavily equipped but lacks formal tactical training.
Interesting.
However, despite the clumsy weapon placement, the masking and the systematic blinding of the camera demonstrate a clear, calculated criminal mindset. They knew exactly where the camera's blind spots were.
Here's where it gets really interesting, and honestly, where this case pivots from a standard missing persons investigation into a chilling technological thriller.
Yeah, the timeline shift here is critical.
20 minutes after the camera detects that masked intruder at exactly 2:28 a.m., Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker app suddenly disconnects from her mobile phone.
This is the digital heartbeat of the crime.
Explain that.
Nancy is 84 years old. She has limited mobility. She relies on daily medication for survival, and she has a sophisticated pacemaker surgically implanted in her chest that constantly monitors her cardiac data.
Okay.
That pacemaker is designed to communicate via Bluetooth Low Energy with a proprietary medical app on her smartphone. It sends telemetry data, heart rate, rhythm anomalies, battery life, so her cardiologist can monitor her health remotely.
But I have to put my skeptic hat on for a second here.
So for it.
We are relying on a Bluetooth connection to establish a timeline of a violent crime. Apps crash all the time. Phones run out of battery. My wireless headphones drop their connection if I just walk into the next room. Could the 2:28 a.m. disconnect just be a tragic technological coincidence? Like a software glitch that happened to occur on the worst night of her life?
That is the very first thing investigators had to rule out, and they did so by looking at the environmental telemetry. The pacemaker app relies on a Bluetooth proximity tether.
Meaning they have to be physically close to each other.
Exactly. When police arrived at the house the next day, they found her mobile phone sitting on its charger, fully powered. They found her wallet, her keys, and her life-saving daily medications undisturbed on the counter.
Oh, wow.
So we know with absolute certainty The phone did not leave the house, and it did not die. For that specific Bluetooth connection to sever at exactly 2:28 a.m., one of two things had to happen.
What are the options?
Either a highly sophisticated, localized signal blocking device was suddenly activated inside the home, isolating the phone from the pacemaker.
Which seems extreme.
Or, far more likely, 2:28 a.m. is the exact physical moment Nancy Guthrie was carried or forced out of her front door, moving her physical body and the pacemaker inside her chest, beyond the roughly 30-foot maximum Bluetooth range of her charging phone.
God, so we aren't just looking at a dropped signal. We are looking at a literal digital timestamp of a kidnapping. It marks the exact second she was taken out into the dark desert night.
Precisely. It is the definitive smoking gun of the timeline. And this raises an important question. How did the abductor know how to isolate a vulnerable 84-year-old from her medical monitoring systems without triggering an immediate emergency alert?
That implies they knew about the pacemaker.
Right. It suggests the perpetrator either had intimate, terrifying knowledge of her specific medical vulnerabilities and how those devices worked, or they were executing a complete blanket technological blackout of the entire property to ensure no signals of any kind, security, cellular, or medical, could get out.
Okay, let's dive into that technical blackout, because this is where the investigation gets incredibly dense, and frankly, where I have the most questions. The method used to plunge this neighborhood into the dark tells us exactly what kind of criminal we are dealing with.
It's a massive point of debate.
Because we know Nancy's doorbell camera was tampered with, but the FBI discovered it goes much deeper than just a potted plant over a lens. There was a broader mystery of missing footage all across the surrounding neighborhood. What exactly did the neighbors report?
A couple living immediately adjacent to the Guthrie property reported a highly anomalous digital event. They have a robust, 4-camera smart security system mapping the perimeter of their property.
Standard for that area, I'm assuming.
Yes. When they checked their cloud footage for the overnight hours of February 1st, 3 of the cameras, the ones facing their backyard, their driveway, and the street, worked perfectly. They captured a quiet night.
Okay.
But the 4th camera, the specific one positioned on the side of their house, pointing directly toward Nancy Guthrie's property, displayed a not available message for that critical time frame. It simply stopped recording and uploading.
And it wasn't an isolated incident, right?
Not at all. Several homeowners in the Catalina Foothills confirmed to investigators that they experienced uncanny internet glitches and localized flickers right around the 1:30 a.m. to 3 a.m. window.
So their routers dropped, smart TVs disconnected, cloud cameras buffered and died?
Yes. So the FBI has developed 2 working theories for how this neighborhood was blinded. Theory A is the high-tech angle, a Wi-Fi jammer.
Okay, break down the science for me. How does a device like that actually suffocate a neighborhood's internet?
A Wi-Fi jammer, sometimes referred to as an RF or radio frequency jammer, is a specialized piece of hardware that is highly illegal to sell, market, or import in the United States. The FCC aggressively tracks these devices.
But how does it work? Is it hacking?
No, it does not work by hacking into your router. It doesn't crack your WPA2 password or infiltrate your network. Instead, it relies on brute force physics.
Brute force physics. I like that phrase.
It acts like a massive digital megaphone. Your home Wi-Fi operates on very specific radio frequencies, typically the 2.4 gigahertz or 5 gigahertz bands. A jammer simply floods those specific frequency bands with absolute overpowering garbage noise.
So it's like trying to have a quiet conversation in a library, and suddenly someone walks in with a bullhorn blasting static, and you can't hear the person sitting next to you anymore.
That is the perfect analogy. Wi-Fi networks use a protocol called carrier sense, multiple access with collision avoidance.
That's a mouthful.
It is, but in simple terms, before a camera sends a video packet to the router, it listens to the airwaves to see if the channel is clear.
Like checking if someone else is talking.
Exactly. If a jammer is flooding the channel with static, the camera constantly hears noise and politely waits for it to clear. It waits and waits and waits until it times out. Legitimate signals simply cannot be decoded by the router.
And the FBI believes there is physical evidence on the video that supports this high-tech theory, right?
They do. Analysts poring over that 2:12 a.m. footage of the porch monster pointed out a strange bulge or spot in the right pocket of the suspect's sweatpants. Some cyber analysts believe that bulge is the antenna for a portable, battery-powered jamming device or a modified handheld radio.
So a jammer in his pocket.
Yes, a localized, pocket-sized jammer perfectly explains the peculiar nature of the neighbor's camera failure. Why did only the neighbor's camera pointing towards the Guthrie house get knocked out, while their other 3 cameras survived.
Why?
Radio frequency degrades over distance. The closer you get to the source of the jammer, in this case the suspect walking on Nancy's property, the more the signal degrades. The camera facing the suspect was overwhelmed by the noise floor, but the cameras on the far side of the neighbor's house were just far enough away to maintain a tenuous connection to their router.
Okay, look, I get the theory, but I have to push back hard on this jammer idea.
Why is that?
Because I'm looking at the logistics and it just doesn't add up. It sounds like something out of a Hollywood spy thriller, and the reality of the digital evidence doesn't seem to support it.
How so?
Think about it. If this guy had a military grade, or even a sophisticated black market RF jammer active in his pocket radiating interference, why didn't it black out the entire block uniformly? We know other Ring doorbells down the street were still functioning. My wireless headphones drop if I go to the kitchen. You're telling me a battery-powered jammer knocked out specific houses?
Yeah, you have to consider the geography and the architecture of the Catalina Foothills. We are talking about homes built with thick stucco, adobe, and heavy masonry, surrounded by dense desert brush and undulating terrain.
Right.
These physical barriers are notorious for attenuating or absorbing radio frequencies. A portable jammer operating on a lithium-ion battery simply does not have the wattage to blast through 3 stucco houses. It creates a localized bubble of interference, perhaps 50 to 100 feet in diameter. As the suspect moved through the property, that bubble moved with him.
But consider the timing of the footage we actually have. This is the glaring hole in the jammer theory for me.
What about the footage?
Think about the Google Nest footage the FBI recovered from Nancy's own porch. We have a clear, black and white infrared video of this guy walking right up to the door, fumbling with a potted plant, looking directly into the lens.
Yes, we do.
If an RF jammer was active in his pocket, actively flooding the immediate area with noise, that video file would never have been created. The camera wouldn't have been able to process the motion and save the file.
Ah, I see where you're going with this.
I was reading the analysis from Morgan Wright, the CEO of the National Center for Open and Unsolved Cases, and he argues exactly this point. He states definitively that if a jammer had been persistent and up and running while the suspect was on the porch, you would not get those crystal clear frames. The interference would have corrupted the digital writing process.
Wright is a brilliant analyst, but we have to look at the hardware architecture of a Google Nest camera. As we discussed earlier, the FBI pulled this footage from the edge computing buffer, not from the cloud.
Right, the internal memory.
Exactly. The camera does not need an active Wi-Fi connection to record. It only needs Wi-Fi to upload.
Oh.
When the jammer severed the Wi-Fi connection, the camera's internal processor kept recording the motion to its local memory cache, intending to upload it the second the interference cleared. The suspect didn't realize that jamming the signal doesn't stop the local recording. It is only when the suspect physically tampered with the device that the recording stopped.
Okay, I see the logic, but it still feels overly complex. Relying on a battery-operated dark web device that might fail, might get blocked by a stucco wall, and might leave cached footage behind seems sloppy for an operation that was supposedly planned for weeks.
So what's your alternative?
Which brings us to theory B, the ground-level physical sabotage angle. And honestly, this theory terrifies me even more because it is so brutally simple, it's so tactile, and it requires zero advanced technology.
The utility box?
Exactly. In early March, local police and the FBI were seen combing through the desert brush and examining a physically damaged telecommunications utility box located on a property in the immediate vicinity of Nancy Guthrie's home. Why are we talking about radio waves when we have physical damage to the neighborhood's actual internet infrastructure?
The physical sabotage theory is incredibly compelling, precisely because it eliminates the variables of wireless interference. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos confirmed to the press that the severe physical damage to this specific neighborhood utility box may be directly linked to the cascading internet outages and flickers reported by the surrounding neighbors on the night of the abduction.
Exactly. Look at it from a criminal's perspective. Why take the massive risk of importing an illegal Wi-Fi jammer, praying the battery holds up, and hoping you understand the physics of RF interference when you can just walk up to a green metal box in the dirt with a pair of heavy-duty bolt cutters?
It is a much more direct approach.
If you pry open that junction box and sever the Heartline internet service, the actual fiber optic or coaxial cables feeding the block, it perfectly explains why multiple neighbors suddenly got not available messages on their cloud-based cameras. The routers didn't get jammed with noise. Their physical bridge to the outside world was amputated.
Right.
When the hardline internet drops, every single smart camera on the street that relies on the cloud is instantly blinded.
And we have a frightening precedent for this exact tactic. Cutting hard lines at the utility junction box is a known, documented signature of highly organized professional burglary rings.
I've heard about this.
Investigative reporter Michael Ruiz has extensively covered how transnational theft groups, particularly South American burglary tourism rings, have been utilizing this precise physical method to disable wireless cameras and alarm systems in affluent United States neighborhoods over the last 3 years. They know that hardwired closed-circuit analog security systems, the kind banks use, aren't affected by internet drops. But they also know that residential neighborhoods in the Catalina Foothills rely almost exclusively on Wi-Fi-enabled smart cameras.
Like the Ring and Nest cameras.
Exactly. If you snip the coaxial cable at the street level, every Google Nest, Ring, and Arlo camera on that node becomes nothing more than a plastic paperweight.
But let me challenge the logistics of the utility box sabotage, just to play devil's advocate against my own theory.
Go ahead.
We are talking about the Catalina Foothills in the dead of night. No streetlights, dense brush. How does a suspect know exactly which green box out of dozens in the neighborhood services Nancy Guthrie's specific house?
That's a great point.
If they cut the wrong line, they might disable a house 3 blocks over and leave Nancy's cameras fully operational.
This brings us right back to the weeks of behavioral casing and the unmarked white van. Identifying the correct utility box requires sustained daylight reconnaissance. They would have needed to trace the buried utility lines from her property edge to the distribution node.
So they were out there mapping it.
It implies a level of operational planning that goes far beyond a typical home invasion. It means they are out there, posing as utility workers or just observing, mapping the physical grid of the neighborhood.
So we are left weighing 2 distinct, terrifying realities regarding this technical blackout window. Either this abductor possessed the technical sophistication to use invisible radio waves to silently suffocate the digital security of the house, creating a moving bubble of static.
Which is terrifying.
Or they physically stalked through the desert brush with bolt cutters, systematically hunting down the neighborhood's digital arteries and plunging the block into the dark before ever stepping foot on Nancy's porch. Either way, this confirms one horrifying truth. This was absolutely not a crime of opportunity.
It was a surgical strike against a vulnerable target, executed by someone who understood the exact failure points of modern home security.
Right.
And that immense level of planning brings us to the physical forensic evidence left behind. Because even the most careful, tech-savvy criminals leave a trace when they interact with the physical world. Let's pivot from the digital sabotage of the network to the tangible forensics. Specifically, the Ozark Trail backpack and the discarded black gloves.
Yes, the backpack is a massive clue. In all the press briefings, the FBI specifically highlighted the bag the suspect on the video was carrying. They identified it as a 25-liter black Ozark Trail Hiker Pack.
Now, to the average person watching the news, that sounds incredibly generic. It's just a black backpack.
Right. Why is the FBI so fixated on this specific brand? How does this help them narrow down the suspect pool?
It seems generic until you look at the supply chain. Ozark Trail is not a brand you can buy at any sporting goods store or order from dozens of online retailers. It is a proprietary brand sold exclusively at Walmart.
Okay, that narrows it down.
This immediately narrows the geographic and retail footprint the FBI has to search. But the real breakthrough comes from how these specific bags are merchandised in the physical stores in Arizona. This is where the physical world collides with the suspect's digital footprint.
How so?
You might think buying a cheap $30 backpack at a massive big box store at 2 in the morning makes you invisible, but it achieves exactly the opposite.
Oh, right. I was following the open source intelligence community on this. Investigative journalists and Reddit true crime sleuths who have been poring over every pixel of this case pointed out a crucial detail about the retail environment in Tucson.
It's a fascinating detail.
Jonathan Lee Riches, an investigative journalist, actually went to a Walmart just a few miles from the Guthrie home to look for this exact backpack. And he found that you cannot just walk down the camping aisle and throw it in your cart.
Why not?
Due to organized retail theft, these specific Ozark Trail backpacks are locked securely behind Hagee glass security cases.
Think about the friction that creates for a buyer. The suspect could not just grab it off a shelf, keep their head down, and use a self-checkout terminal to remain anonymous.
Nope. You have to get an employee.
Exactly. To purchase that specific bag, you are forced to find a store employee. The employee has to physically walk to the aisle, verify the item, and unlock the glass case with a proprietary key or a digital scanner. That process forces a sustained face-to-face human interaction. It ensures the buyer is standing in a specific spot for an extended period.
And it forces a massive digital sweep of the buyer's identity. If you are forced to buy that bag through employee, you are generating a highly specific timestamped receipt. If you use a debit or credit card, boom, the FBI has your actual name, your banking institution, and your billing address.
But even if they use cash,
Even if the suspect was smart enough to use untraceable cash, the FBI still has them trapped in a digital web. They just have to look at the store's back-end system for the exact minute that electronic glass case lock was disengaged, cross-reference it with the point-of-sale cash register timestamp for the exact transaction, and pull the high-definition CCTV footage from both the camping aisle and the checkout lane.
that is brilliant. Former FBI Executive Assistant Director for Intelligence Joshua Skull confirmed this is exactly the forensic retail strategy they are employing.
They're doing it right now.
Yes, they are not just looking at one store. They're taking the volume of all 25-liter black Ozark Trail purchases across the entire Tucson metropolitan area over the preceding 3 months. They're working backwards from the transaction timestamps, isolating the CCTV feeds, and looking for a buyer matching the Porch Monster's 5'9" average build and distinctive gait.
That is an insane amount of data to process.
It is, but Walmart Corporate has reportedly cooperated fully, handing over massive tranches of purchase records, including credit card names, loyalty program data, and video archives to the authorities.
So the abductors' attempt to use generic, cheap gear to blend in might actually be the very thing that unmasks them. That is a brilliant piece of investigative work.
It really is.
But not all physical evidence in this case has been a silver bullet. We need to talk about the black gloves, because this part of the timeline is absolutely heart-wrenching. What happened with the gloves found near the scene?
This was a moment of massive nationwide hope that quickly turned into a devastating twist for the Guthrie family. In mid-February, local investigators conducting grid searches found a pair of heavy black tactical gloves discarded in the brush on the side of Orange Grove Road, approximately 2 miles from Nancy's home.
And to the naked eye, they matched the video.
Exactly. Visually, they resembled the exact gloves worn by the masked suspect in the Ring camera video.
And the media just exploded when the FBI announced they had successfully extracted male DNA from the inside of those gloves. Everyone following the case held their breath, thinking this was the end of the manhunt. The authorities rushed that DNA profile to the lab and ran it through CODIS.
The Combined DNA Index System.
Oh, right. For those who aren't familiar, can you explain what happens when DNA hits CODIS?
CODIS is the FBI's national database of known criminal offenders. It catalogs specific genetic markers, short tandem repeats, or STR loci from individuals who have been arrested for or convicted of certain crimes.
Okay.
When investigators upload a fresh DNA profile from a crime scene, the system runs an automated algorithm searching for a statistical match against millions of known profiles. A direct hit gives you a name, a mugshot, and a criminal history in seconds.
But the hit on these gloves was a complete mirage, wasn't it? It didn't solve the case at all.
It was a brutal false hope. The Pima County Sheriff's Department later had to announce to a deflated public that the DNA extracted from the gloves did not return a match in CODIS for any known violent criminals.
Oh, man.
But it gets worse. Through local shoe leather detective work, they eventually traced the DNA profile back to a local restaurant worker.
Wait, what?
Yeah. They interviewed him, vetted his alibi, and realized he was completely innocent and totally unconnected to the abduction. The gloves were likely just trash blown onto the road from the back of a landscaping truck or dropped accidentally by someone walking home from a shift weeks prior. In the grand scheme of the investigation, it was just environmental digital noise that wasted precious days.
That roller coaster of emotion has to be agonizing for Savannah Guthrie and her family. To be told the FBI has the kidnapper's DNA, only to have it yanked away. But there actually is real viable forensic hope in this case, isn't there?
There is.
Because while the gloves on the road were a dead end, the police found something much darker but much more useful on Nancy's front porch.
Yes. Investigators discovered blood droplets on the porch concrete, and a rapid DNA test confirmed the blood belonged to Nancy Guthrie, which escalated the urgency of the medical response.
Which is terrifying in itself.
It is. But far more importantly, confidential law enforcement sources revealed to journalists that crime scene technicians collected a separate, pristine profile of unidentified DNA from inside the residence itself.
Wait, they found suspect DNA inside the house, past the tampered camera.
Yes, they recovered biological material, likely sweat, skin cells from a struggle, or perhaps blood if the suspect injured himself, that did not belong to Nancy. Furthermore, they tested it against elimination samples.
Meaning her family members.
Exactly. It did not belong to Tommaso Cioni, her daughter Annie, or anyone known to be in her immediate social circle who had visited the house recently. This unidentified DNA is the absolute gold mine of the investigation.
Even if it doesn't hit in CODIS.
Even if his specific profile doesn't trigger a hit in the CODIS criminal database, which implies the suspect might not have a prior felony record, the FBI has far more advanced tools at their disposal today. They have brought in world-renowned experts like C.C. Moore to utilize investigative genetic genealogy.
Okay, we need to unpack investigative genetic genealogy, because this is the revolutionary tech that famously caught the Golden State Killer after decades of cold ends. But how does it actually apply to a live, active kidnapping investigation like Nancy's?
It shifts the paradigm from searching for the criminal to searching for their family. Instead of relying on CODIS, which only contains criminals, investigators take that pristine, unidentified DNA from inside the Guthrie home and translate it into a massive data file.
And then what?
They then upload that file to public, open-source genealogical databases, places like GED Match, where regular law-abiding citizens voluntarily upload their own 23andMe or Ancestry DNA results to find distant relatives and build family trees.
So they aren't looking for the kidnapper's exact profile in GED Match, because criminals generally don't mail their spit to Ancestry websites. They are looking for partial matches.
Exactly. They're looking for shared DNA centimorgans that indicate a familial relationship. They might not find the guy who broke into Nancy's house, but they might find his third cousin who lives in Ohio and just wanted to know if he was part Irish.
That is wild.
Once C.C. Moore and her team identify that third cousin, the painstaking historical work begins. They build a massive, sprawling family tree backward from that cousin, poring over census records, birth certificates, and obituaries from the 1800s until they find common ancestors.
And then they reverse it.
Yes, they reverse direction. They build the family tree forward to the present day, tracing every branch, every marriage, and every offspring. They filter that massive list of modern-day descendants looking for a male who matches the physical profile. Roughly 5'9", living in or near the Tucson area, who possesses the technical capability to sever utility lines, and crucially, who has no solid alibi for the early morning hours of February 1st.
It sounds like a needle in a haystack, but a haystack made of math.
It is painstaking, agonizingly slow work that can take months of mapping out hundreds of relatives, but it is scientifically rigorous and ultimately inescapable. If the suspect left biological material inside that house, genetic genealogy will eventually mathematically draw a circle around his name. You cannot hide from your own bloodline.
But all of this forensic talk, the debates about the Wi-Fi jammers, the edge computing buffers, the DNA centimorgans, it can almost make you forget the terrifying reality at the center of this case. At the center of this massive federal investigation is an 84-year-old woman.
Yes, we can't lose sight of that.
A mother who loved her family, who went to church every Sunday, who was violently taken from her bed in the dark.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we absolutely have to shift the tone here because the human element is the entire driving force behind deploying all of this advanced technology. Psychologists and grief counselors have a specific clinical term for what the Guthrie family, and by extension the entire Tucson community, are experiencing right now as the days turn into weeks.
What is it?
It is called ambiguous loss.
I read a deeply moving article by Ed White that referenced the foundational research of Dr. Pauline Boss and Dr. Ty Mendenhall on this exact topic. It is a devastating psychological concept. Ambiguous loss is what happens when a loved one goes missing, and the family is literally frozen in a state of suspended grief.
Suspended grief. That's a powerful way to describe it.
You have no closure to process, you have no proof of life to hold on to, but you also have no definitive proof of death to mourn. You are trapped in the middle.
Ty Mendenhall, a prominent medical family therapist, notes that empirical psychological research shows ambiguous loss is arguably the most psychologically painful and complex kind of loss a human being can endure.
Because the brain just can't process it.
Exactly. The human limbic system simply cannot process the lack of resolution. It creates a profound, corrosive sense of helplessness. The brain constantly oscillates between hope and despair, unable to begin the natural grieving process. Dr. Pauline Boss originally coined the term in the 1970s while working with the traumatized wives of soldiers missing in action in Vietnam.
Wow.
And later she applied it to the families of those whose bodies were never recovered in the 9/11 attacks. The trauma doesn't lessen over time. It compounds because the brain is denied a factual ending.
And you see the specific agony playing out painfully in public with the Guthrie family. Savannah Guthrie and her siblings, Annie and Cameron, have released these heartbreaking, desperate video pleas on national television. They are not asking for justice right now. They are just begging the abductor to reach out, to show mercy. Savannah announced a staggering $1 million reward for any information leading to Nancy's safe return.
They're pleading for any shred of proof of life. Savannah has bravely stated in interviews that they are, quote, blowing on the embers of hope, trying to keep the possibility of her survival alive.
It's so sad.
But she has also acknowledged the incredibly dark reality of her mother's age and health, stating through tears that her mother might already be in heaven dancing with her late father. In a move that truly illustrates their understanding of this broader pain, the family even donated $500,000 to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children.
That's incredible of them.
By doing so, they are acknowledging that they have unwillingly been drafted into a terrible fraternity of families living with this specific, unresolvable kind of pain.
It is so important to remember that Nancy Guthrie's high-profile case, fueled by media attention, is actually shining a much-needed light on thousands of other marginalized families experiencing this exact same ambiguous loss in silence. The reporting highlighted the story of Lynette Pino, an indigenous mother from the Tusuc Pueblo in New Mexico.
Her story is just as heartbreaking.
Her 19-year-old son, Darian Navayactua, vanished without a trace in June 2008 while traveling to see his father in Arizona.
Lynette Pino has been trapped in the purgatory of ambiguous loss for nearly 18 years. She watched the national news coverage about Nancy Guthrie, and she felt that exact, visceral recognition of pain in Savannah's face.
Yeah.
Lynette's public message to the Guthries was profound in its simplicity and its sorrow. She said, do not give up hope. Don't let law enforcement put it aside. It is a powerful, sobering reminder that behind every forensic puzzle, behind the timelines, the utility boxes, and the digital footprints we analyze, there are real families in absolute agony sitting by the phone waiting for a call that might never come.
It really puts the immense stakes of this investigation into stark perspective. So let's summarize the exhaustive forensic journey we have just taken today. This case did not start on February 1st. It started weeks prior, with a hunched-over man in street clothes slowly scoping out the affluent Catalina Foothills on January 11th, mapping a target.
It then escalated into a highly sophisticated technical attack in the dead of night, whether executed through illegal radio frequency jammers suffocating the airwaves, or the physical, brutal severing of hardline utility boxes. Either method was expertly designed to blind a neighborhood's modern security infrastructure.
It left us with a chilling digital heartbeat. The 2.28 a.m. sudden disconnection of an 84-year-old woman's Bluetooth pacemaker, a dropped signal that marked the exact physical moment she was taken from her home.
And it currently leaves federal investigators chasing a digital echo, the vast retail purchase history of a Walmart-exclusive Ozark Trail backpack, and the slow, methodical, inescapable science of genetic genealogy trying to put a surname to the unidentified DNA left behind inside the residence.
Which brings me to a final provocative thought I want to leave you with as we close this file. We have spent the last hour talking so much about what this masked abductor did to hide. They covered the lenses, they may have cut the utility lines, they wore a heavy balaclava and tactical gloves, they demanded cryptocurrency and layer communications to avoid the traditional banking system.
Right, all tactics to stay invisible.
They used an impressive array of technology to execute this crime in the absolute dark. But in the hyper-connected modern world, the absence of data is, in itself, an incredibly loud piece of data.
That is a very true statement.
Think about the negative space they created. By successfully blinding the Ring cameras at exactly 1:47 a.m., by dropping the neighborhood Wi-Fi, by severing the Bluetooth medical connection at 2:28 a.m., the suspect didn't just hide in the shadows, they drew a perfect razor-sharp digital silhouette of themselves.
Yes, they did.
They handed the FBI the exact timestamps of their movements, the exact technical capabilities they possess, and the exact retail profile of their preparation. They created a massive void of information that investigators are right now filling in with retail receipts, cell tower pings, and sprawling DNA family trees. It is only a matter of time before the FBI fills in that outline completely and the silhouette gets a face.
The digital age makes it nearly impossible to truly vanish. Every desperate attempt to erase a footprint only leaves a different, often more permanent kind of impression on the system.
Thank you for joining us on this exhaustive investigation on deep dive files. This case fundamentally changes how we look at our quiet neighborhood streets, the illusion of our home security, and the terrifying vulnerability of the technology we blindly rely on every single day. Stay curious, look out for your neighbors, and stay safe.